And I'll say this specific to special operations in the SEAL teams. It is such a team mentality and atmosphere that you constantly have people willing to pick up the slack on things that you're not performing at. For me, sitting down at a computer and doing a PowerPoint is torture, right? It's awful. And without medication, it's something that I would absolutely struggle with. I would put it off. I wouldn't get it done until I had a deadline. And it would take a deadline of probably tomorrow for me to actually do it. And that's how I was in school. Like, unless there was a deadline, I didn't get stuff done. So you're in this community of ultra high performers, all with a shared vision and goals, who work together to get stuff done. And it's perfect for people with this condition because you have people picking up on your weaknesses and carrying you through.
Welcome to Successful with ADHD. I'm Brooke Schnittman. Let's get started. Welcome to Successful with ADHD, Andrew Sullivan.
Thank you. It's so good to be here.
So for those of you who don't know who Andrew is, he is a retired Senior Chief Special Warfare Operator, SEAL. Andrew medically retired from the U.S. military in 2020 after nearly 2 decades of service in the special ops community, including 6 years at SEAL Team 2, 11 years at Naval Special Warfare Development Group. His many combat commendations include the Silver Star Medal, 2 Bronze Star Medals with Combat Valor, the Purple Heart Medal, the Defense Meritorious Service Medal, 6 Joint Service Commendation Medals with Combat Valor, 2 Navy and Marine Commendation Medals with Valor, 3 Presidential Unit Citations, and numerous other joint and individual awards. Let me take a breath for a second. And following Andrew's time in service, he started Blue Force Strategic Action Group, a SDVOSB that provides tactical security and leadership consulting at the DoD, federal, and law enforcement agencies. And he has consulted with several organizations advocating for mental health treatment for veterans and first responders. And he is a board member at One Summit, a 501(c) that provides resilience training for pediatric cancer patients. And I'm going to keep going, but I know I haven't got it all. He is an MS in strategic leadership from the University of Charleston, West Virginia, and has 2 daughters that he currently resides with.
Yeah, it's a lot, right? Sometimes I look at it and hard to believe.
Well, you worked hard for all of that.
I tried. Yeah, the only thing missing, I started my own nonprofit last year called Community First Project, which c1p.org. And, our focus is community safety. And we do that by providing free training to law enforcement at the patrol officer and school resource officer level to help them combat some of the high stress critical incidents that we're seeing across the country.
Wonderful. So you're not busy at all?
No, not at all. Lots of free time.
Yeah, sounds like it. So I know that you were diagnosed in high school.
Correct.
What made you decide to serve out of all the things that you were looking at?
I always had that in my mind that I wanted to do something in the service, and specifically the SEAL teams. I didn't want to join the military to be a conventional soldier or sailor. I wanted to be at the front lines. And honestly, probably a little bit of complacency on my side. I knew the risk of trying to go to BUDS, which is SEAL training, and that, 75, 80% of people that try to do it won't make it through. And to walk away from where I was in my life at that point, even though I wasn't happy with what I was doing, it was a risk. And for me, it took 9/11 to push me into making that decision. I went into the recruiter's office the next day, 9/12. I'm like, how can I get out of here? What can I do? And I've always had a call to service. That's how I motivate myself is I'm a service oriented person. That's why I have so much involvement in the nonprofit side. And that was just another way for me to serve. And I felt like protecting my family and my friends was where I needed to be and what I needed to be doing.
Wow. So I know it's not easy to get to where you were and to continue to serve in the ways that you are. When you decided to try out for the SEALs, I don't even know if I'm using the right word or terminology, so please correct me if I am.
No, you've got it.
Did you disclose that you had an ADHD diagnosis?
Absolutely not. Yeah, no, the least they knew, the better, right? I didn't want to give them any reason to nip it in the bud before I even got the chance to try. So didn't say a word. In fact, I don't think I've told anybody this really until we started talking, in retirement. So, nobody's
Yeah.
business but my own.
Yeah, totally. And you were not taking medication at the time for ADHD?
I did my first attempt at college. I was taking, I think I was taking Ritalin at the time. And I just didn't like it.
Hmm.
I was never a big kid, but I played sports and my life revolved around wanting to play sports. And I think I lost 15, 20 pounds in a couple months and no appetite. It wasn't for me. And I would rather do terribly in school and lose focus than not be in the shape that I wanted to be in.
Were people allowed to serve who were taking stimulant medication?
You know, I've never heard otherwise. And I don't know if it's a disqualifier or not, to be completely honest. I've never even thought about that. It's ironic. I think people with the condition actually tend to do better in the military. It's certainly in specific jobs in the military, like special forces. It's almost the perfect environment for it because there's so much going on. It's really hard to lose focus. So it worked out great for me. And really, I didn't get back into medicating, Adderall until later in my career when I got back into college and when I moved to a higher leadership level to where I spent a lot of time having to be at a desk and write evals and awards and do more administrative stuff. And I found myself kind of reverting back to my high school days where I couldn't stay there. I couldn't sit and focus. And it
Hmm.
would take me 4 or 5 times longer to do the same task as other people because I couldn't make myself do it. So, the rest of the career, as long as we were in combat, going overseas and doing that job, it was fantastic from that perspective.
It's so funny because people say that people with ADHD have a hard time following through. And you had the accountability, you had the desire, you had the interest, you had the core values, the purpose, and the strengths. So you accomplished the most difficult psychological and physical training, I think, that exists in the world.
I agree, but to me, the following through part is definitely an issue in my life. It always has been. But if I have a purpose, it's a lot easier for me to follow through on things. And 9/11, I mean, what other purpose do you need really to get through the training? Because it was life and death for our communities, and it was so much easier to do it. And really, to be completely honest, there's not a lot of thinking involved in buds. It's just keep moving forward and get kicked and cold and wet and sandy repeatedly over and over. And it's not hard. It's like playing a sport almost. So it wasn't as difficult from the mindset as you would think.
I love how you say, yeah, I love how you say it wasn't that hard. It wasn't as
It was
difficult
hard
as you
because,
would think. But meanwhile, meanwhile,
yeah,
this
it's the
is
best time
like,
I would never want to do again. We'll put it that way.
well, okay, 20
Yeah.
years of it is enough.
Yes.
And how many people try out and how many people make it? I know you said 75% of
Yeah.
people who try out don't make it.
And I can give you a generalized number. My buds class started with, I think, 188, and we finished about 22 of the original people that started. So it's a high attrition rate, and it's people quit. Not a lot of people get dropped from SEAL training. It does happen, but the majority of people that don't make it through, it's because they choose to deselect themselves.
Hmm.
And for whatever reason, whether physically they don't like it, emotionally or mentally they can't handle it. And some people, I think, are young and never been away from home, and this is their first experience with life away from mom and dad. And man, it's a shock. For
Sure.
me, I went to college first and had a job and had some life experience of being on my own before I went, and I knew I didn't want to go back to that. And that's a great motivator as well. So, perspective, mindset, trying to have goals and orient towards them help me to maintain focus in situations where, normally it would be difficult for me to do so.
Were there ever moments where you just wanted to give up?
There were moments where I wanted to be warm and not wet, but the idea of quitting, I never thought about quitting. For me, and it's funny, I talk about being 24 and training like being an old man, and it really is physically. 21 is kind of that sweet spot, 21, 22, 18, 19, you're fresh out of high school, and it's really mentally your first experience with being away from home, and it's mentally tough. Once you hit 24, 25, the physical pain of doing this repeatedly for 6 to 8 months becomes hard. And for me, it was
Mm-hmm.
always, I don't want to get hurt. I got to maintain and not do something that's physically going to prevent me from making it through. And that sweet spot at 21, 22, it's great because you have that mental toughness and physically you recover a lot quicker. And I know it's weird. I'm talking about 18 to 25, like it's this huge age range. And when it comes to that kind of world, it is. I mean, look
Yeah,
at pro athletes, right? A lot of pro athletes, football, whatever, they're done by
they're
26,
done.
27. And that's the reason. So it's the same with us.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So, what do you think the benefit? And I know you said there's so much stimulation, but why do you
Mhm.
think, besides that, someone with ADHD could have more of an advantage in serving?
And I'll say this specific to special operations in the SEAL teams, and I know Army, their higher level special operations, it's the same. It is such a team mentality and atmosphere that you constantly have people willing to pick up the slack on things that you're not performing at. And, let's say I'm the guy, I need to do a PowerPoint. And for me, sitting down at a computer and doing a PowerPoint is torture,
No,
right?
thank you.
It's awful. Yeah. And without medication, it's something that I would absolutely struggle with. I would put it off. I wouldn't get it done until I had a deadline. And it would take a deadline of probably tomorrow for me to actually do it. And that's how I
Hmm.
was in school. Like, unless there was a deadline, I didn't get stuff done. So
Hmm.
you're in this community of ultra high performers, all with a shared vision and goals, who work together to get stuff done. And it's perfect for people with this condition because you have people picking up on your weaknesses and carrying you through. It's great. And honestly, I try to recreate that now in my business and my nonprofit because I function really highly in that type of atmosphere, in that type of community.
I was going to say the same thing. I mean, isn't that the truth? If we are
Yeah.
in an environment where there's different types of learners, there's different types of strengths, and we can all complement each other, wouldn't that be ideal? Especially if they have the same values as you.
Yes, absolutely. And I think a lot of the business world, it's you're competing against people, not with people. and
Yeah.
and that's where we separate the military is, we have a common goal, and it's defeat our enemies, right? And we are working together to get that done in whatever way possible. It is the epitome of a team atmosphere, and it is so functional. It's really a great environment to be in and to work in and to learn it. Every day I
Hmm.
went into work, and I viewed it as, if I don't get better today, someone's going to take my job from me. So there was never that point of complacency that I had in school where, hey, if I don't learn this, who cares? I'll just look it up online 10 years from now when I
Right.
need it, right? Man, I need to be a better shooter today. I need to be better tactically today, or else this kid behind me is going to take my job, right? And,
Yeah.
and it's a great motivator.
You mentioned also that many SEALs have ADHD or undiagnosed ADHD.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's commonplace in our community. And again, we make it function because of how our community operates. And it's really cool to see.
Hmm.
But it also, and I don't, I guess it's kind of negative and I don't mean it that way, but at some point the ride ends and you have to get off the train,
Yeah.
and you have not prepared yourself to handle the life situations or the next career because you've worked in a community that you will never again work in, and never have the ability to have those people around you to help you be successful. So
Sure.
for me, I lost 20 years of trying to learn how to accept and overcome my ADHD because I never had to. I just had people naturally around me that helped me and also who
Hmm.
probably had the same issues, a lot of them. And I don't know, it's kind of a weird catch 22, right? So I got out and it's like, oh God, what do I do? And, I was, still working on my master's. And at that point, I got on the Adderall train and I needed it. I didn't
Hmm.
like it, but it was a
Hmm.
necessary evil for me
To
to be able to
study.
focus and sit down and study and write papers and sit through classes and at the same time start a business and do all the business paperwork that comes with business plans and as soon as that ended, I tapered back and actually I went cold turkey and stopped taking it for almost 2 years.
Hmm.
And then I kind of got back to the point where I was like, okay, you know what? For me to function, I need to take a little bit in the morning.
Give you that boost.
Yep. And I see where my day goes and I get most of my critical thinking for work done in the morning, actually while I'm working out of all places, because I,
The dopamine gets flowing.
the dopamine, but it channelizes my focus. Like when I'm doing all this ancillary stuff, lifting weights, running on a treadmill, it's a lot less for me to think about because it's just second nature. So I'm able to focus on some strategic things. And I have a whiteboard in my gym with me, which is my garage. And I take notes as I work out. And then when I get done, I go to my computer and I bring my whiteboard with me and I transfer that information.
It's so interesting. People with ADHD, they always hear about mindfulness and
Mhm.
meditation. And unfortunately, there's too much of a negative connotation with having to do this and stay
Yeah.
focused. But working out really is meditative because you're focusing on one thing, right?
100%. That is my therapy. And if I don't do it, I feel different. I hate taking off days for that reason. I'm open to anything. So I've tried float tanks. I've tried acupuncture. I've tried Reiki. Anything you name it, I've tried it at some point in time. And within 2 minutes, I'm like, I start getting angry. I'm like, get me out of here. This isn't for me. I don't sit still. I can't stop moving. And the gym, it gives me the best of both worlds. Like I can turn my mind down, but keep the physical activity up, which is what I need to really reset.
Yeah. So you've definitely had enough cold exposure in your
Yeah.
lifetime. I'm guessing you're not into it at this point.
No, no. Yeah, it's funny. My kids will be like, can we go to the beach? I'm thinking wet, sandy. No, 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 thank you. Or
Yeah.
I'll just drop them off. Yeah.
Yeah. So transitions are very hard for people with ADHD, but I'm sure there's a level of PTSD that you had to deal with transitioning.
Yeah. And honestly, I had a really difficult time. So when I got shot, I also had one of my close friends get shot. And so I had survivor's guilt because I made it and he didn't. And that really, for me, was one of the hardest times on the emotional side, which brought out a lot of the issues with the ADHD and the focus. And because it was towards the end of my career anyway, and that was 2017. And it's the first time I ever went and saw someone and talked to someone. And, just growing up in a community where seeing a therapist or shrink or whatever, it's never been a real open dialogue, meaning
Hmm.
if guys do it, they hide it because they don't want to
Hmm.
seem weak. And for me, I was just in a position where I had to, and that's kind of how I actually got back onto the Adderall, or not on back on, but how I started taking Adderall was just helping me focus my ability to work through some of the issues I was having on the post traumatic stress side, which
Hmm.
I found out then helped me to focus on some of the issues I was having on school or work or family, right? Where I was more
Hmm.
disassociated than I wanted to be. And, you know,
Hmm.
on that side, having this condition really, it exacerbates my ability to look at extreme negative and extreme positive in a
Hmm.
hyper focused way.
Interesting.
And at that point, everything was very negative for me, and I was very hyper focused. And I think a lot of being on Adderall as much as I was on at the time didn't help that either. So
Sure.
it's a constant fine line of up and down to get to where I need to be. And I'm great now, and talking about it turned out to be the greatest thing I could ever do. And then talking to my teammates about what I was going through and finding out that almost all of them were going through the same thing And now we're actually going to talk about it and change the culture, or at least try to change the culture to where it becomes acceptable to talk about PTSD, to talk about ADHD, to talk about being on medication for this types of stuff. It made a huge difference, at least in my team and with my guys.
Yeah. The power of community.
It's great, right? We do it so well in our jobs, but we don't do it well in mental health.
We
It's
don't.
an ironical. Yeah.
We don't. And definitely stigmas have been broken a little bit more since the pandemic, but
Yeah.
still it exists today. My goal is to really reach millions of people and know that they're not alone.
Yeah.
And the more you talk about it, the more you hear. It was like when I went on antidepressants for the first time and then I started talking about it. People were like, oh, yeah, I'm on it too.
Yeah.
Really? But just no one talks about it.
Yeah. Right. The stigma of it. And you have this group of high performing alpha males who don't ever want to look weak in any way possible. And to talk about being depressed or mental health issues or PTSD or whatever, it didn't happen for the longest time. But we're
Yeah.
changing it. And now, as I get out and I started my nonprofit and I start talking to law enforcement about their needs, one of the first things every single department I go to, they bring up is mental health. And what I see in law enforcement right now with all the stuff that is going on in the media and how they're being used as kind of political tools from the right and the left is that they're where special forces community was about 10 years ago on the mental health side, with the suicide rate increasing and the job satisfaction decreasing and morale decreasing and retention and recruiting all decreasing. And a big part of that has to do with the mental health of the job in the environment, and a failure to be able to talk about it amongst your peers. So we really are digging into that and digging into how our community has been affected since we started opening up more about it and treating it, and hopefully
Mm-hmm.
we can take that to the law enforcement community as well.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about what you guys actually do to help law enforcement with mental health.
Yeah, so one of the pillars of the nonprofit, and it's something we've really just touched upon, and it was by circumstance, because me being someone who's been shot, been in some catastrophic incidents, the law enforcement community doesn't really have a lot of that. Meaning, there's not a lot of police officers. If you look at all the numbers, over 700,000 police officers, the number of officers who are shot on duty is relatively small. And it seems to
Mm-hmm.
be growing, which is absolutely terrible and another story. Also, the number of officers who have to use their gun in the line of duty, it's less than half of police officers will ever use their gun in the line of duty throughout their career.
Wow.
But as we see these things happening, and as I started getting more involved with the law enforcement community and realizing that when an officer is in a critical incident, whether or not they are the shooter or the one that has been shot or injured, there's nobody on their job who can share that similar experience, and maybe some of the big cities. So my idea was, well, why don't we pair them up for some peer mediation with somebody from my profession who has had a similar incident or a similar injury, and let them be there to support. It's not a clinical, anything. It's just, hey, here's a friend that you can talk to
I love
when
that.
you're going through rehab, or you're looking for doctors and you want to know, hey, did they tell you this when you got shot? And I'm like, yep, that's exactly what they did for me, and it worked out great. I got the feeling back, blah blah blah, whatever it is, right? Or I had a kid last year who was on the job for less than a year, and his partner got shot, and he had to shoot and kill the person that shot his partner, and he was devastated. He took a
Oh,
life,
gosh.
and you don't think about that in policing as much as you do in the military, because you tend to expect that in the military. And I think in special forces particularly, I didn't sign up and think to myself, well, I'm never going to have to shoot someone. Quite the opposite, right? So there's a different mental acuity that we have in special forces that isn't always seen in law enforcement, especially at the
Mm-hmm.
patrol level, maybe not SWAT. So, you know, sitting down with him and talking to him and letting him know that he did the right thing. And he did 100%. He saved his partner's life by doing what he did. It was a very difficult time, and he didn't have anyone to talk to. and just being there on the mental health side to provide some guidance and some reassurance that everything's going to be fine and you did do the right thing. Honestly, we get a lot of support for that, and a lot of people take an interest in that.
Yeah, it's so niche because people don't really know if you haven't gone through that yourself, how
Yeah,
can you really talk through experience with someone who is feeling that way? So that
absolutely.
added value is huge because you've been there, done that.
Yeah, and had the same feelings. And our community, we get typecast quite a bit. People hear what we do, and they have this image of Navy SEALs as invincible and tough and strong and without feeling and heartless sometimes, right? And it's not. Like, we go through the same emotional distress that anybody else does. We just do it over and over and over as long as we keep doing that job. And we
Mm.
compartmentalize really well, which I think is an ADHD thing, right? We're able to separate feelings from thoughts and all that.
And
So
problem solve
and,
really
and we
well
problem solve really well, and we suppress feelings really well also.
until we can't anymore.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
exactly, and it takes, for me, it was getting shot and losing another friend that really brought everything to the boiling point, and really forced me to actually get help.
Mm. So you have been trained on mental toughness more than any other profession in the world, and you're coming out saying, even with all of that training, you still have emotions, you still have feelings, you
Yeah,
still get sad, even though you can decompartmentalize, eventually you bury and bury and bury it, it eventually comes out somehow.
yeah,
And you're not alone in this feeling, and there's other people out there that you can talk to. I love that.
absolutely. And I mean, just look at the suicide rate in our community, right? In the veteran community, 22 a day. In the SEAL community, I don't know the numbers, but yeah, I've lost half a dozen friends to suicide in the past few years. So it is predominant, which is people not communicating, and whatever the cause. Obviously, CTE in our world, it is significant, which is the same thing the NFL players are going through with the brain trauma.
The traumatic brain injuries. Mm-hmm.
So for us, it's they're finding that it's less about the impact. So NFL players are repeated impacts where they're having the dead brain cells in the gray
Concussions.
spot. With us, it's from explosives passing through our brain. So being in close proximity, and me being a breacher who was an explosives guy throughout my career, just being in close proximity to these explosives, we're finding the rules and regulations for distance from the explosions really weren't accounting for the blast waves traveling through our skull. And actually, the helmets we wear cause them to reverberate continuously through our skull. And now we're doing, donating the brains of guys that are killing themselves. And we're finding similar responses in the brain that these NFL players, just in different locations. Like, ours are way more internal. Theirs are more external of the brain, from the brain bouncing off the skull. Ours are the blast waves traveling through the brain and reverberating back through.
So are you having blackouts and
I am not.
uh,
No. So I've been pretty
okay.
fortunate on my brain health. I say that I've had a brain tumor that I had ever moved. So, which, why someone at my age and my health has a brain tumor, who knows, right? And right now the Pentagon isn't too willing to talk about it or look into it, and it's another thing in our community that the amount of cancer, testicular and in the brain, and the amount of tumors, mine was fortunately benign, is, for the population and the health of our population and the age range, it shouldn't be there. It just shouldn't.
No,
Yeah.
no. Wow, I'm getting the chills. It's almost hard for me to speak. And this episode better not be flagged on Spotify or any
I don't know why
podcast.
I would be. Speaking the truth, right?
Okay, good. Yeah, exactly. And thank you for doing that,
Yeah, of
because
course.
there are people listening who want to serve or have served. And
Yeah,
I personally, unfortunately, know someone who did serve, his brother served and then committed suicide after Iraq because it was just too much for him. And then
yeah,
unfortunately, the friend of mine who was the older brother had severe ADHD and was a big supporter of the service units and military. And he dove into a canal head first. And it was too shallow, and that was it. So, I mean, there's just so much there. And I'm not
Yeah.
trying to scare people who are listening, but like if you are listening and you feel alone, reach out to Andrew. He can get you,
Yeah.
connected to the right people, whether it be
Absolutely.
his community or someone else. You're not alone.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a group effort, and we all have to be there to support, right? And it's you can never tell who it is. And I hate to say it, that the friends that I've lost to suicide. I never would have believed it. I didn't see it. I don't know how, other than having the conversations regularly and checking up on your friends. And the military offers some great benefits, and it's been really good to me and to my family. But there's also a detriment, especially when you're 2 decades of sustained combat, right? It wreaks havoc on physically and mentally on people's bodies.
Hmm.
So we just need to be aware of it, and we need to be talking about it. And there's great opportunities in the military for people with ADHD and other conditions that you wouldn't get in the business world or other aspects of general population. So
Yeah. And I know we're wrapping up, but if you guys have ever read about hunter gatherers, ADHDers were the hunters. We would go, we would slay, we would protect. And I think that really ties into the benefits of, being able to serve with ADHD. So if you are recruiting and you have an ADHDer who really wants to serve, just remember that.
yeah, right, exactly. No, and it just we need to be able to figure out how we function. And I think for me, I never thought about. I always thought about how it limited me. I never thought about the advantages of having it and how I could function with it. And I just luckily found this community and got into it and thrived. And it just made me reevaluate, you know, this condition and how I can be successful with it.
Mm, so good. And people ask all the time, how do I find what I want to do with my life? Do I get a career coach? Who do I speak to? And so many times, like you said, it was purpose. 9/11 happened and that was
Yeah,
it. That change, a real traumatic event, one of the biggest traumatic events in the US. And you decided that that was the breaking point. I have to do something about it. So
yeah,
sometimes it's not, you studying up on something. It's not you getting a coach for something. It's a feeling inside of your body and a change and a purpose that is just driving you to do the thing.
exactly. And honestly, I never felt like I was working. I always felt like the SEAL teams was a placeholder for me not to grow up and have to get a real job. And then what I didn't realize at the time is that my motivation was service. And that's what got me to, more focused and able to be successful in things that I normally probably would not have been so successful. And you mentioned transitioning earlier. When I transitioned out of service, I kind of went back a little bit and regressed to when I was going into the military. And the nonprofit stuff was, again, just kind of a placeholder while I figured out what I wanted to do next. And then I realized, no, this is what I want to do
This
next. Like
is it.
service, like I don't get driven by financial gain, right? Not that I don't like to make money, but it doesn't get me out of the bed in morning, right? What gets me out of bed is helping other people, being service oriented, and making a difference in communities. I just needed to kind of go from this to this and realize, what I needed and what I needed to do.
Yes, big picture,
Mm-hmm.
purpose, and then the purpose will drive you and it's your
Most definitely.
passion and eventually you will get to where you need to financially because
Absolutely.
of the drive there. So,
Absolutely.
Andrew, how can people find you if they want to reach out, help out, donate?
I think the easiest thing to do is to check out our website, which is c1p.org. It links to the Instagram page. Instagram is community_first_project. I'm at Sully underscore C1P. Reach out anytime. You can email me directly through the website. You can hit me up on Instagram. Take a look at what we're doing. If you want to support, there is a donate link on the website. Every bit helps. It all goes to help law enforcement. We're always looking for police departments. So if you have questions from the law enforcement side and you're listening to this, feel free to reach out and have a conversation. Sometimes just having a conversation is enough.
Yeah. And I know it confusing with the spelling out of one or putting the number one. So we'll definitely have those links in the show notes.
Yes.
So you don't write the wrong way of the number one.
It is the one, not ONE, just one. Yeah. But yes,
the
I
number
agree.
one.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for being on Successful with ADHD.
I appreciate it. It was great to connect with you and to have this conversation. Anytime you want to chat, just let me know. Happy to do it.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to this episode of Successful with ADHD. I hope it helped you on your journey. And if you need any additional support for you or a loved one with ADHD, feel free to reach out to us at coachingwithbrooke.com and all social media platforms at Coaching with Brooke. And remember, it's Brooke with an E. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.